Hi, and welcome to the PodKaz. I'm Todd Milewski here with Nicole Haase. We're from USCHO.com, and we are here to talk women's hockey with you. We've got a little bit of PWHL to talk about as we enter the regular season later this week, but let's get right into the NCAA weekend that we saw just a few days ago. Nicole, the big series for me was Colgate and Cornell
Absolutely.
going into the weekend, and it did deliver. Colgate handing Cornell its first loss of the season 3-0 on Friday. Cornell beating Colgate in overtime on Saturday after being down 2 goals in the second period. I think good things on both sides
For
there.
sure.
We had talked about Colgate needing to build something and this being a great opportunity for them. Well, they did that on Friday. Not far away from getting a sweep, what would have been a really big sweep, but Cornell does show a bounce back and get right back into it on the second day of that.
Yeah, I think it's two things, right? It was signs of life from Colgate, and like not just with the win, but it was an okay first period, and then they must have had one heck of an intermission, and they came out and scored 2 goals in 70 seconds to start the second, and that's how you turn the tables. That's what you build on, all the sort of stuff we've been talking about, sort of hypothetically for teams that need to get back into it. I felt like Colgate went out and did sort of exactly what they want to do in that game, and then had a solid game in the second game too. And for Cornell, it was that ability to fight back and come back, right? When you've started off undefeated and, sort of all those cliches, but it's the things that adversity you need to face. And you want to be doing that now in the first half and before we get to, February. So I thought for both teams, there was just so much to like about what they did. And, just to keep showing and building on them. So yeah, for Colgate, I thought, wow, okay, this is like, where has this been? So I don't know what needed to happen or what clicked for them. If it was that rivalry game, but it felt like the pieces came together for them in a different way this weekend.
Yeah, I thought so. And that first game, it's not like that was a fluke or anything. They outshot Cornell 44-20. So you could say that game was definitely in their side the whole way. Brooke Davis made 20 saves for the shutout. And like you mentioned, Alexis Petford and Emma Gervais Beauchamp got goals in the first minute, 10 seconds of the second period, and away they went after a kind of a seemed like a little bit of a feeling out first period, and it had some chances, and then it did go Colgate's direction in the second period there. So that being Cornell's first loss leaves Penn State as the only undefeated team left in women's hockey. The Penn State is now 14-0 and running away with things in Atlantic Hockey America, as we talked about before. But Cornell, Carell Prefontaine getting the overtime goal in the Saturday game. Important for the Big Red there, down, like I mentioned, 3-1 in the second period to find their way back, and that's something that is going to, I think, pay off throughout the season. You see, teams always ask, well, how do we do when we face some adversity? Well, there it was. You lost one, you're down by a couple of goals. Let's see what you've got, and I think Cornell showed us something there.
Yeah, I will say too, though, I think maybe the one sort of question mark or the little wobble is that every one of their goals was special teams. And so there's absolutely positive of clawing your way back and also taking advantage of the opportunities presented to you, but also not great that they're not scoring at even strength there. And so it was at even strength a bit of a struggle for them at times. So, things to build on and learn from. And just overall, yeah, I felt like both of those teams has to come away from that weekend pretty happy. I mean, the way things are going, Cornell probably felt like they could sweep that weekend and things like that, so there's some disappointment there. But with the way the games played out, I think they both come away from that with the points, but also with the lessons learned and the stuff that's going to help them for the rest of the season.
Yeah, a couple other results in ECAC last week that worth mentioning. Harvard getting a 4-1 win against number 10 Yale on Friday. Emily Davidson making 43 saves for the Crimson there. That's a team we haven't talked a lot about over the last few years.
No, they had their worst season in like program history last season. Like they've struggled. So I assumed that's what we were going to see more of, right? Like they definitely weren't on my radar to be doing what they've been doing so far.
So yeah, I think early in the season, it's they start later than everyone else. We've talked about that before, but finding some wins here and there is big for that program to rebuild. I don't know where they are necessarily in that, or whether you even call it a rebuild, given the way things kind of shift year to year anyway. But if you can put some roots down there in terms of how you're going to move forward, that's a good way to do it, especially against Yale, which we know Harvard and Yale have a pretty spirited rivalry in all sports.
Yeah, I mean, they're not only are they just like getting the wins and getting the results, but they're scoring almost a goal more per game, or I think it's over a goal at this point. They're allowing a goal fewer per game, like all of those metrics that you want to see. And it's just true too that like winning begets further winning, right? Like when they have their worst record in program history, it's not great to show recruits, right? So like when you start getting those wins, it's kind of some of the stuff we've talked about with Brown and Dartmouth over the last couple of years. They don't have the same storied history as Harvard, but you have to show that work to improvement to pull in those recruits. So it's this like building process. And I feel like what Harvard is doing this year is showing that like that season, I mean, it hasn't been great for a couple years, but last season being the worst, like that is the anomaly and not what we want this program to be. There's been a lot of changes there over the last couple years. You've kind of got your coach getting settled and getting her own stamp on a program that was coached by the same person for decades. So yeah, I just think like there's nothing but good to see out of what's coming out of Harvard so far this season.
Yeah, Harvard 5-4-1 overall, 3-4-1 in ECAC play. So yeah, not a bad start for a team that, like you said, had just a year to forget a year ago, and where it seemed like nothing went right. Having something go right fairly early, an important step there. Also, rewinding a little bit further, last week there was a midweek game. Number 12 Clarkson got a 6-1 win over St. Lawrence on Wednesday last week. That one, I felt like that was an important one for Clarkson. Midweek games, you never really know where, what's going to show up sometimes, especially then you don't play the following weekend. You've got a little bit of time off. For Clarkson to come out and get a big win in that game, I think it was impressive, and especially after having just kind of a really rough stretch of things, a tie with Quinnipiac, scoreless tie, I believe it was, if I'm remembering it right, and Princeton losing there.
We were worried about Clarkson scoring goals, right? Like, and then they came out and were like, no, it's fine. It's all fine.
Yeah, scoring 6. That's a big one, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was a really important sort of statement, bounce back, however you want to say it. And it's obviously things weren't low, but I think just sort of shaking off what happened before, and like you said, having that really, and that's a big rivalry for them. We talked about those schools are literally, a couple miles apart, and I think, yeah, that's their daytime game, and just there's so many good things that happen there for them to come away with and really sort of prop up the last few weeks before they head into the break.
Over in the WCHA, we had St. Cloud State hosting number 1 Wisconsin, and the first game ended up 5-1 for Wisconsin. But the Huskies, I was impressed on Saturday with the number of times that they rebounded and responded to Wisconsin goals, and getting a 4-4 tie. Wisconsin did win the shootout after that, so they took 5 of 6 points. But Emilia Carrico, 52 saves in that one, returning from injury, kind of showing what St. Cloud had been missing a little bit over the last few weeks. And just for St. Cloud to, we've talked about this plenty of times, it's tough to make any headway in the WCHA. For them to get even that kind of result and show that, look, whatever's happened, but we're not backing down in our own building, to come back from 2 goals down, and then caught back up, made it 3-3, went down again, but with a power play goal by Wisconsin, and then Maria Mikhailian. Sorry, I probably got that wrong.
Mikhailian, she's Russian, so I think it's Mikhailian. But
scored on the power play, 3:46 left to make it 4-4. So impressive result, if not the full result that St. Cloud would have wanted.
For sure, but you could see, we've talked in passing, like, some of the teams maybe from the bottom of the half the standings might steal some points, these weren't stolen points. Like, though they honestly probably should have won that game. Like, they made Wisconsin look bad, and every time Wisconsin, sort of found their depth and do what they do as one of the top teams in the country, they were still able to answer. And I think like that's such a crucial point to what happened there. Some of it was teasing, I think, but I saw some talk on social about like how I think St. Cloud is like 4-9-1, something like that. Like how they're still ranked as high as they are, and it's like because look at that game. They're in these really tough games. They're not getting blown out from them. They're winning the games they should win, and they're coming close in the games against teams that are significantly better resourced and stronger than they are. I think like there is a valid conversation to have there about how much you want to weigh some of that stuff. I don't think it's a nonsense conversation, but I also think that people are not. If you just look at that record, like that's not fair to St. Cloud State either. I think a lot of other teams that are currently ranked would not have as good of a record on St. Cloud's schedule as St. Cloud currently has. And I just kind of want to shout out to, like, I think I have talked a bunch about some of the freshmen, especially some of the European freshmen on Ohio State and Minnesota and some of the other schools. Maria is someone that has been, I think, a little under the radar coming out of Russia. Like, we're not getting as much, sort of information or things like that. And she has been a huge addition to that roster. I was looking up, but she played a little bit with NEWHA at the KRS Vanka Rays. And that was the connection to get her to St. Cloud and to meet Brian Adulski to get recruited, and just like what a huge addition for them. She is so dynamic. She impressed me so many times already so far this season, and they're a dozen games in or whatever it is. So she's someone that I think needs to be on more radars for sure.
On the other side of that is a Wisconsin team that, like you mentioned there, had some stretches where just didn't look very good last week, coming off of a bye. Now, a bye when they had 5 of their players at the rivalry series, so it's a little bit different. But
they had their full roster for the first time in weeks, and they looked slow. Right. There was a lot of turnovers, a lot of defensive mistakes, some of the same stuff we saw against Minnesota a few weeks ago. I don't know, man. It was not a good look.
No, and that's has to be a little bit of a concern if there's. I mean, I think there's points that you can say, well, look, this is probably pretty correctable. Sure. A lot of the things, because there was some of it was there. I think some effort questions. I think there were some attention to detail kind of things that. Yeah, it's probably good for them every once in a while to get
valid.
To pay the price, and for those things to then mean something, and be able to turn it right back around in practice, because the quality is obviously no lower there than it has been. So it's a matter of putting it together, and that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily that it was a bad game that's concerning. It's, for me, partly that it was the second one, that we're seeing some of the same stuff that went poorly against Minnesota and led to that loss, and then also that it came off the bye week. And as you said, there are asterisks to that, but this is a team, Mark Johnson and even the players were talking about how important that weekend off and some of that was, and so to come out looking like this after that bit was a little like, that's not great, guys. And again, like, we haven't talked about it as much since the beginning of the season, but with the Olympic stuff, like none of this is getting any easier. And so if this is what you're doing with your full roster, then there's work to be done, right? Like there's a lot of things that you have to be unhappy with there. So and also, like, I think it's one of those things where they're their own worst enemy, and that they've set their own expectations really high. Like, we know how good they can play. We know what Mark Johnson expects from them. So when you see some of the laziness and the effort stuff, it's a little like, But that being said, I think if that persists, they've got quite the bench, and those players just won't be on the ice anymore. So, or won't be on the ice as much. So yeah, but the effort thing is just very strange. But you got to remember too that they're still really young kids, right? Like, even though we think of them as professionals and some of them are going to be Olympians, you're still talking developing minds and developing players. So, yeah, I think there's some asterisks, and also kind of like we were talking about with Clarkson, right? Like if that continues, I have concerns. And Clarkson went out and did not continue it, so maybe that will happen again. But yes, it's one of those like I'm gonna bookmark that and remember this and think about it in a couple weeks.
Right. Also in the WCHA, Minnesota Duluth, number 5 team in the country, as of last week, got a sweep at St. Thomas, number 15. 3-1 on Friday, 4-2 on Saturday. Eve Gascon on Saturday with 35 saves to complete the sweep. And that's, feels like you're definitely seeing that division forming in the WCHA between the top 4 and the bottom 4. There's not a lot of question that's the way it is again.
Absolutely. The sort of, appendix to that is that I thought, I thought Minnesota Duluth dominated the games. They were in control of the games, but St. Thomas was in both of the games. And I think that for them is the thing that they have to take away from it, that it wasn't, again, the idea of like they're not stealing goals and things like that. They're holding some possession and making some really good plays and needing to be able to put it all together. But those are pretty close results for St. Thomas in that situation. And so I think, yes, we have the dividing line, and also there are, positives to see, what could be coming as well.
In Hockey East last week, we had a rivalry series between Boston College and Boston University, and BC got a sweep of that home and home set. 5-2 at home on Thursday, 3-2 on Friday at BU at Agganis Arena. I believe that one was. Or what did they play that at Walter Brown?
No, it was at Agganis.
We had it listed as Agganis. Yeah, okay. So 2-2 going to the third period on Thursday, and then BC broke it open with 3 goals in the first 6 minutes. On Friday, 2-2 game late in the third, and Emma Connor scores for a 3-2 lead, and the Eagles salt that one away to move to 7-6-1 overall and sending BU to 2-10. We've talked before about BU struggling. We've talked before about BC doing a little bit of surprising too. I think we saw both of those happen on the same weekend. Right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that BC has, I think, struggled with over the past few seasons is like sort of that consistency to put up a good result, followed up by more good results, and taking advantage of opportunities in front of them. Obviously, I think Northeastern has really stepped it up. They set a program record for consecutive wins to start their conference season, but BC's hanging with them, and I think, that Northeastern is doing better, but isn't where they had been in the past few seasons. And BC is really consistently going out and not just winning games, but, winning close games. They've had some of those late goals. It's just sort of all those little things that we kind of want to see from a team that's really going to fight for that top position. I just think that they're putting things together really nicely, as opposed to like possibly having 1 or 2 good games, if that makes sense. That it's really sort of building on each other and stringing stuff together. That's the part that's impressing me so far this season.
Also, a big crowd there on Friday. It was, I believe, at BU for a special night there, right?
Yeah, they set a home and Hockey East home attendance record with 3,965 people. The previous record was set at Agganis. I say it differently than you, and I assume you know it better. Is it Agganis?
I don't honestly know.
Yeah.
No,
someone from Boston will tell us, I'm sure. But that is 1,100 more people that had set the record at this game last season. So obviously not the result that BU wanted, but really cool. We just don't see those sort of crowds at women's hockey in Boston right now. Just there's a lot of different things that people can and get themselves entertained with, and so I like seeing these bigger crowds up there. The players deserve it, and maybe PWHL is helping that, whatever it is. I hope we see more of these, multi-thousand crowds out in the Boston area for these teams.
Delaware getting its first Atlantic hockey victory on Friday, beating Lindenwood 5-3. Caitlin Finnegan scoring 2 goals there. So that's 2 wins now for Delaware. Every milestone, means something when you're building a program. And so getting a first conference win, I know has to be big for Delaware.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think like we've seen like it's really hard to start from scratch, and it's like St. Thomas at least was playing NCAA. Like these guys weren't even doing that, right? Like it was a club team, and so I'm just really impressed with what they've been able to do in terms of not just results, but sort of how they're playing in games and how they're showing out in these very first few games as a brand new NCAA program. So yeah, like you said, that first conference run's a big one. Also, they're all blue jerseys. They're like bright blue jerseys. I think I said this on social. Like so good, such a good look. So always nice to look nice while you're doing it too.
Absolutely. Mercyhurst and RIT. Interesting set of results there. 1-0 for 1-0 for RIT on Saturday. I guess they were close.
Yeah.
Magdalena Lugan, not sure. Mercyhurst goalie, 24 saves Friday. Sophia Belina, 46 saves for RIT Saturday. So and those are the teams that were kind of in that race for second place. So them splitting, Penn State continuing to win means now Penn State's 16 points clear of Mercyhurst atop Atlantic Hockey America. So that one could be over by first week in January, second week in January. It's
yeah,
kind of trending.
I wanted to point when you mentioned Penn State before too. Like, not only are they on this massive win streak, like they outscored. I think it was like 50. I don't remember. They outscored the opponents like 17-2. They had like an 11-goal game this weekend, and I believe Tessa Janicki had one or had assists. Like it's not they're not just relying on her. Right. Like just complete dominance from the Nittany Lions. And then, I'm sorry, I wanted to go back with RT and Mercyhurst. The weird thing is what we've been seeing a ton in splits is sort of really, like, opposite results. So, like, a team, I mean, kind of like Wisconsin this weekend, too. Like, you win 5-1, but then you lead to win in a shootout the second game. We're not seeing a lot of 1-0, 1-0 splits. It's been a lot more parity, a lot less consistency. I was just like looking at RIT and like, yeah, their last couple series, they lost to Lindenwood on Halloween 3-0 and then won 7-1 the next day, right? Like they lost to Syracuse 5-2 and then won 4-1 the next day. Like we're seeing these crazy switches between the first and second game of a series. So to me, 2-1-1-0 games is actually kind of weird from what we've been seeing so far this season.
Yeah. I wanted to mention in NEWHA, Saint Anselm beat Long Island 2-1 and 8-2 to move 8 points ahead of Assumption. So that's actually the second biggest lead. Penn State obviously having the big lead in Atlantic hockey. Saint Anselm up 8 points in NEWHA. Everything else is within a point and a half. Saint Anselm pushing ahead here and it has a big one coming up this week with a home and home against Assumption, who's in second place. So that could really extend that, or Assumption can get right back in it.
Yeah, and just shout out Assumption for like solidly in second place too. Again, just like not where we thought the team would be at this point. So going into this season, like they're I think sort of massively overperforming from what they've done in the past, and they're doing it consistently. But yeah, St. Anselm is just on this, like they're not splitting their series, right? Like they're taking the points every weekend, and that's what's made this big difference. There's been some great parity on the rest of the conference where you're seeing these really interesting, results back and forth over a weekend, and with St. Anselm being able to take all 6 points or most of the points every weekend, it's that's making a huge difference for their lead in the conference.
Okay, that wraps up our look back at last week. We will have more of a look ahead at what's coming this upcoming weekend in a few minutes. But when we come back in the next segment, I'll look at the first weekend of PWHL play. Stay with us on the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. Todd and Nicole here, and let's talk some PWHL, which gets its third season started on Friday with a pair of games, Toronto at Minnesota and the expansion team, Seattle at Vancouver. And I saw that Golden Eye logo on the center ice at Pacific Coliseum, and that looks pretty good. Just the logo in the center and nothing else. They did pretty well on that one.
They did, and I have to say I had heard the name ahead of time, and I wasn't so sure, but the logo and the messaging around it has all been really good, and like you said, it looks really awesome there at center ice. I mean, that's the only team that has their own home ice, right? That isn't sharing it. So pretty cool for them. Just a good step forward for the league as well. And then to have it look so pretty is just a sort of cherry on top, right?
So 2 new teams like that are playing right away, Seattle and Vancouver, making it an 8-team league. What kind of things do we need to be looking out for this season? As you know, that means there's more players in the league, but there's also been more players coming out of college joining the league. So we're seeing some player movement that maybe is a little unexpected.
Right, and also a continued influx of players, international players coming in. So teams have until Wednesday to the 19th to finalize their rosters. They have to be at 23. So teams have been sending out press releases in the past 2 days talking about, sort of who is no longer on the training camp roster, like where they're staying, how many they have, forwards, defenders, goalies. I think the one that most caught my eye was Elizabeth Jaguar being dropped from the training camp roster from Ottawa. Probably the biggest name that I've seen so far. Obviously, plenty of other recognizable talent as well. I saw Olivia Walline. I think one of the things that's interesting is I've seen some people drop from rosters that were drafted last season too. And so just not something you necessarily expect or see, but there's all the players that are dropped from training camp rosters will be eligible to sign for other teams. That doesn't mean any of these players aren't going to play this year. But yeah, it's like that's a player that regularly got ice time, right? And spent a lot of time, helping out her team, and someone who we know is really talented. And I think it was just surprising. So I think that's going to continue to happen. I think there's a bigger player pool. There's a lot more talent out there. And I think teams can be a bit more flexible on, like, if this isn't working, whatever it is, whether it's chemistry, whether it's handedness, whether it's someone not doing as well on faceoffs, if they there's a pretty big pool of other players to try. And so I think that we're going to see a bit more movement than maybe people have thought about or maybe prepared for. There was, so much uproar with the expansion draft and players moving from where we expected them to be. I still am getting surprised at times when I see there's been some preseason games and some social media updates, and you're like, oh, right, that player's there now. So I think that's something that I think fans are just going to have to continue to get used to until that changes, and we're just going to keep having an influx of talent to a limited number of roster spots.
I've wondered, I guess, over the last few years, not just this year, but what kind of is going to be the long-term relationship between teams in North America and teams in Europe, because there's no real minor league here. No call up, sending down, nothing like that in any way that's going to get them keep still playing minutes, important minutes in games. I don't know. Do you have a good feeling of like what that is going to be looking like in coming seasons, or even throughout this season, of what when someone loses a spot in the PWHL and doesn't look like they're going to get another one, are they looking to Europe? Are they?
I think so, for sure. Just because you want to, if your goal is to get back on a roster, like, you have to be playing. So right. I'm not sure I love I don't know. I think it's implied, even if you don't mean it, that like sort of the other leagues are feeder leagues to the PWHL, and I don't know that any of them would love being called that, right? Like that they would be the minor leagues to the PW. So I think there's some carefulness there, but without going on too far of a tangent, like this is and has been an ongoing problem for the WNBA, right? So there is a bit of a blueprint in terms of like more seasons of what does this look like, where there's way more talent coming in than there are roster spots. And obviously the WNBA is slowly expanded, but like one of the things they've dealt with is there's a lot of hardship contracts and things like that because they don't have this minor league system. What they're trying to avoid is for you to like take a player and stash her on like your practice roster and not let anybody else have her, but also not pay her and things like that. And so like I said, I don't want to get too far off topic, but I do, for people that are interested in that, I think you can find a lot of writing about how the WNBA has navigated that, not necessarily always well, but what are some of the pitfalls and the things that can come up when you have this huge player pool. And it does make me wonder if we're going to, like, could we be talking about shifting seasons in terms of like, so you could play overseas and you could play here. You know, like if there's almost like a back and forth, and so you could like as we were seeing from WNBA players when they were going overseas, or now they have, you know, the 3-on-3 league in their off season. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like. Obviously, all of those comparisons are not direct, but I do think there are some, if not blueprints, some ways to look at things, to think outside the box and look at what you can do to try and retain that talent and make sure that there's not sort of the loss of players that suddenly don't have anywhere to play. But yeah, I do assume that if you're, I think one of the things that we probably have to learn more about is like the fluidity of going between those two leagues. And
Right.
like maybe intermittently to start, and how open any of them will be. Like, are we going to see like almost like 2-way contracts? But I don't know that the SDHL is super amenable to being tied. Mostly because
what I
the
was just gonna say.
conversation has sort of pitted that as the lesser. And I don't think anybody
Right.
takes kindly to that. And so, yeah, it's all, do I have an answer? Absolutely not. I'd be hopefully getting paid as a consultant if I did.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel like that's a real like sustainable two-way discussion, because you've got leagues in Europe and Sweden specifically that do not want to be seen as second class, and put forth a lot of effort to be a top tier option.
Right. Like before the
So I
PWHL
don't,
ever showed up.
right. And so, yeah, I don't see that just being oh yeah, we'll stash you in Europe for a while, kind of arrangement.
I would also say the SCHL is very focused on like developing Swedish talent first. They take that pride in like, this is our home league, and there are rules from the federation about how many players, and so there's also some limits to just how many spots over there are for say North American players as well. So they still want to be using that as their big development tool for their own international teams and programs, and so that I think puts a little bit of a hamper on any of those discussions as well.
So what players that just came out of college last year should we be looking for this year in the PWHL as having a chance of putting on a pretty good show in the opportunities that they get to play?
Well, I mean, I think we're both probably a little biased on this one, but obviously I'm a big Casey O'Brien fan. First of all, I just think she's super talented, and we've seen, sort of close hand all of the things all the work she's put in. Sort of each year she picked a skill and really honed it. And I mean, she's a naturally talented, very fast skater that also put in a lot of work to round out her game. And New York officially announced that she was signed a 1-year contract on Tuesday, so that's great. And I also think that when we saw some of the preseason games she was playing, even though she wasn't yet officially contracted, or at least had been announced, she and Sarah Fillier and Kalti Kaltikova basically ran the show. Like, that is a 3-headed monster that all can do a lot of really good stuff, can have power from distance, can puck handle really well, can win face-offs, can go on breakaways. And so I think Kalti and that was such a master move from the Sirens at that draft to get both those two players, to make that trade and get that, that I can't imagine that's not, those two aren't the two that we're going to be talking about and seeing. And then you sort of install them on a line with Sarah Fillier, and it's well, seems a little unfair to everybody else. But of course, New York's had a great roster for 2 seasons and not produced. So I think there's always that. I am yet to go all in on the Sirens until I see them. At this point, any Sirens fan is a little burnt for the last 2 seasons and worrying. But not answering your rookie question, but the other line that I saw during preseason was Abby Rock in Montreal, which everyone needs to remember that's where she is now. But she was on a line with Laura Stacey and Maria Poulin. And that is a lot of not just hockey skill, but a lot of spatial and with the the rules in the PWHL with more contact. Like those are all like really heavy players that really fight for space on the
Grit.
ice.
There's some grit on that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like you're not knocking any of them on their butt real easy. So that is a bit of a I mean, I don't want to imply that there is not also skill and like grace, but there's a bit of a like cannonball bullet at China shopness to that in like the best possible way to that line as well. Like they are, I would not want to be standing between them and what they want to be doing. And any one of the three of them can do something magical with the puck to put it in the back of the net, which it's another line that if that's what they stick with, is going to cause a lot of problems. And it's not as though Montreal has struggled with offense in the past few seasons.
Yes. New York and Ottawa open in Ottawa on Saturday night, Sunday afternoon. Montreal is at Boston. You can find where these games are on TV or streaming on the PWHL website. They've done a pretty good job of giving where all the opportunities, all the regional carriers that are going to be having those games, where you can find those are available on their website.
Yeah, I noted for us, we sometimes here in Wisconsin get Frost games either on the regional network or on their alternate station, but it seemed to be kind of hit and miss. I never knew when that was going to be the case. And so, again, obviously just talking from experience, but looking at the schedules this year, there's a lot more information there about like what secondary or alternate channels or regional networks might be showing it. I saw my Fox 9 or my Fox 9 Plus is going to show more of the Minnesota games, which is cool too. But also in the US, like it's always going to be on YouTube and it's always going to be on PWHL.com. So, it's probably a little concerning that we're in the third season and not talking about a national broadcast for the PWHL. You and I were talking, before we started recording with the return of the NBC Sports Network. Could we see something tied into the Olympics and raised interest there? We don't know. Pure speculation, but, things like that make you wonder. But also all the games are available free on YouTube. And that, I think, makes me less worried about that broadcast. I mean, I think we want them to get the money from broadcasting all that sort of stuff, but in terms of like accessibility, like the games are super easy to see.
Yeah.
And that
YouTube really hits the demographic that they're looking for right where they are, but is not the most lucrative.
Right.
Like you're mentioning, not the highest dollar figure platform.
Yeah,
so,
both things are true.
Yeah,
right. Like
that's right. So that's part of having an emerging league and emerging platform
in a very busy sports season.
Yes.
Yeah, like there's just a lot going on. Like football's still happening, and like there's so many things on any given weekend that I can imagine that it's difficult to find that. But I also don't think that lets anyone off the hook. I do think that needs to be one of the top priorities. We should talk about there were 2 rule changes as well. They took away coaches' challenges, which is super interesting.
Yeah. Interesting.
There was a press conference on Tuesday that I haven't yet listened to, which I'm assuming we'll hear more about it from that. I apologize for talking over you, but yeah, the coaches' challenge thing is fascinating, right?
If it's meant to take it all and put it all in the hands of a review center, I get that. But they've got to be tasked and, confident enough to say we're stepping in whenever we need to step in.
Well, and officiating has not been consistent in the league for 2 years. Like, it's probably been the biggest talking point, the inconsistency, mostly because these are not refs employed specifically by the league. These are officials that work a ton of different places. I tried to track, I remember the first year, I mean, there were so many officials that did 1 or 2 games all season. Like, it's really hard to get used to the rules and knowing how to call it. I mean, heck, we see bad officiating in college from the same officials we've been watching for 20 years. So I can only imagine, but it wasn't set up for them to succeed. So now changing this in a situation where we know the officials, I mean, they also created an officials task force. Who knows if that means anything worthwhile. But yeah, I don't love it in terms of that, like knowing how bad the officiating has been. And by bad, I mean inconsistent. Yeah.
Well, and that is I'm torn a lot between the intent of replay is to reverse obvious
Yeah, to not spend
mistakes,
20 minutes looking
not
at an iPad
really
on a folding table.
well,
Yeah.
right, not to litigate someone's toe being over a line, or on a offside. I have the biggest problem with offside challenges, and so seeing those go away, I'm not upset about that.
Yeah.
I understand there's a possibility that official has missed an obvious
Yeah. It feels
call,
like we
but
went from feast to
that's not
famine.
the
Like,
case.
is there no middle
Yeah,
ground?
right.
I don't know. I can't imagine. I imagine
So
the conversations on that were super interesting, and I don't know. I think it will be one of those where I guess we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But as you said, sort of entrusting it to a center group means that center group has to be willing to step in and make the calls. And I'm guessing part of this conversation is to speed up the games and stop all the challenges. But like, does that mean that the people in the central are gonna like waver about like, is this a thing we're stopping the game? You know what I'm saying? Like, it feels like there need to be some sort of more hard and fast rules, which at least there were for coaches. So
I-
not
and I'm much more in favor of the NHL way of doing things with coaches challenges than the college way, where in college if you have a timeout and you challenge and the call isn't reversed, you just lose the
mhm.
timeout. In the NHL, any challenge that isn't upheld or that it does not result in a reversal is a minor
Yeah,
penalty. And I think that puts enough on the line to slow a lot of let's just challenge it because we can,
right.
uh, sort,
Use
sort
it
of
because you
thoughts
got
that
it.
we see in
Yeah,
college.
which
Yeah.
if you had already used your timeout, you would get a penalty in college,
Right.
but that we haven't really seen that come up too much. We don't see a ton of usage of
Yeah.
timeouts except for towards the end of a game when we're trying to double shift and things like that. So yeah, interesting for sure. That's a wait and see, I think, but certainly something to watch out for. The other was about mandatory third goalie that can be dressed if someone gets injured, which frankly just only makes sense. So that one both pretty low stakes overall. I mean, I think it has a big impact, but I think everybody looked at that one. Yeah, of course. But the coaches challenge thing certainly raised some eyebrows and will be something I think we'll talk about as the season goes on.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, when we come back, we'll talk about what is ahead this week in NCAA women's hockey. Stay with us on the podcast. We're back with the podcast. Todd and Nicole here to wrap things up this week with a look at what we've got coming up in this week's schedule. Starts with a Thursday night game, St. Thomas at Wisconsin. But before we get to that, there's a top 5 series Friday and Saturday. Number 3 Ohio State at number 5 Minnesota Duluth. That is just looking at players on both sides. We've a lot of incredible goaltending. We've seen a lot of, frankly, amazing goal stats being put up on both sides at certain times of the year. This one could be dynamite between these two teams.
Not only that, but had a really good series between these two teams last season. They were pretty evenly matched, and so didn't UMD go in there to start the year and get the couple of wins? So
They did.
yeah, just sort of a lot of history. My bold prediction for this is the Josie St. Martin revenge game. Feel like she's gonna want to show out a little bit against Ohio State here. Yeah, like you said, there's just so many things to like about how this is gonna match up, and probably one of the tougher tests for Minnesota Duluth. So I'll love to see how because so much of what's been great about that team has been some of the younger players. That's not to say the veterans haven't been holding it down, but how does Gascon and Caitlin Kramer and all the rookies, how do they all do in this series? Like that first one, the first week of last year doesn't not great in terms of telling us how things are going to be handled. And that was sort of Creamer's introduction, and she played really well. But now with all that extra experience, that's the sort of stuff I'll be looking at. And obviously, Ohio State's rookies have been some of the best in the country. So it'll be interesting to see if we're looking at what the rookies do or if it's the veterans that carry the day,
Yeah, absolutely. St. Thomas at Wisconsin, I did mention. This is Wisconsin that, like we talked about before, may have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Probably had a interesting week of practice after losing those leads. Yeah, correct. Losing those leads at St. Cloud last Saturday. I'm interested to see how that team looks when they come out of the tunnel on Thursday night.
Yeah, also just that it's a Thursday, Friday series, and like Mark Johnson does not love when his schedule is different than, but that just changes all the prep, right? Like you're talking about they were on the road, coming back, and how, like, if there's stuff you want to work on and it's a short week and all that sort of stuff. So that plays into all of it as well. And, I think this is one of St. Thomas's opportunities to really show that what they've done so far this season can be manifested in games like this. And they've played well and gotten results against some of the other top WCHA teams, but generally haven't done that as much against Wisconsin. So I think for them, it's a big opportunity to show who they are and what they're capable as well. I think for them, that's something that's going to stick in the back of their head, that this is sort of one more giant that they're looking to slay a little bit.
Right. You mentioned Mark Johnson there a minute ago. Mark Johnson got a contract extension recently and a raise of nearly $100,000. So he's already was the highest paid coach as far as we know in terms of the contracts that are available, but it's hard to imagine him not being the highest paid coach in the country right now. Now up to $550,000 a year, which is,
more on par,
quite a bit. Everyone else is making.
Yeah, it's twofold, because it's generally sucks how little women's coaches get paid, and that it does generally, not that he does not deserve it, but I want all of the coaches to have well-paying jobs, and also to be closer to making what their counterparts coaching men's teams are. This brings Mark moderate. I mean, it's still not going to be close, but like this brings Mark more in par on like what coaches of men's teams are making. Some coaches of men's teams are making, and I'd like to see that for more. So he was already making 6 figures more than others, so I can't say that I feel like this is gonna like maybe boost or make other teams like be paying their coaches more. I'm not sure that that's the case. I would like for that to be the case, but also like good for Mark. And I guess it's hard to praise the Wisconsin athletic department, but good on them for rewarding what he continues to do with this program.
It does speak to the difference in resources between the programs. I mean, just that
his raise is probably bigger than several salaries.
It is, and it's the median of the 11 schools we were able to get when I did this research on. I was going back into the summer, so I did this research over the for last year's 11 coaches whose contracts we could get because they're at public universities or not named Penn State. The median was somewhere, I believe, right around 150,000. So now that's been, Mark Johnson has
single-handedly made the median better, so I hope that helps people negotiate.
Well, you make the average better. Yeah, the median is probably still right in that range. The median actually was Brennan Dalsky, who obviously has now moved on to the PWHL, so I don't actually know what it would see. I'll be getting those numbers eventually, I'm sure. So
I hope that at least they can point to an average and help in negotiating for other coaches.
Yeah, right. ECAC this week. Clarkson, we mentioned before, got back on track with a big win against St. Lawrence, and this week hosting number 12 Brown and number 14 Yale. We've seen where Yale obviously had some difficulty last weekend with Harvard. Brown's been on a,
More
has shown
consistent,
some
yeah.
pretty good signs. Yeah.
Unsure what to know about Yale at this point.
If Clark,
I'm not sure what to think. Yeah.
right. Let's see Clarkson against these two teams, and maybe we'll know a little bit more about what we're going to see the rest of the way.
Yeah, Brown plays a slightly unique style to some of the other teams that Clarkson has beat, and there's a lot more speed and fast break and a little bit different style than some of the other teams, and so I think that could just be an interesting matchup, and how both of those teams handle the other, I think, could probably tell us a lot about things going forward. So less the score line and more how does Clarkson handle, sort of the speed and the style of play for Brown, and if the defense does do really well again, how does Brown's offense adapt? So those are sort of the details that I'll be watching for in those games.
Yep. NEWHA leaders Saint Anselm against second place Assumption in a home series Friday and Saturday. We mentioned that before, but this is an opportunity for Saint Anselm to really take a firm grip on first place. Not that they don't have it already, up 8 points, but they even more so kind of say it's going to be tough to pull back and pull ahead of Saint Anselm.
Hard to say this before Thanksgiving, but it does feel like Assumption has to take some points here for this to be like this is a big marker for them. If they take no points this weekend, I feel like you kind of have to take them out of serious running for at least unless things change drastically. It's real early to be saying that, but St. Anselm's lead is such that I think unless they get slowed down a little here by the team closest to them, I can't imagine there will be an opportunity to make up that kind of ground.
Anything else you're looking forward to this week? A lot of stuff going on between college and PWHL.
Yeah, there will be several screens happening in my living room. No, I'm thrilled for the PWHL to be starting. It does, it gets a little overwhelming from a journalist side to try and cover it all. It's nigh on impossible. But I'm always happy for more hockey, and there's just so many things that have changed in the PW from rosters and the new teams and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just hyped to see all of that, and I love how much I'm excited for this weekend, but I love how much the PW plays during the week. I think there's probably some argument in terms of like how that affects it, like in-house attendance, but it's really nice, like for several nights a week to just be able to turn on free YouTube top tier women's hockey at pretty much any given moment. And so I will not lie about that. That's probably my favorite part about the league. I'd be sad if they moved truly to only weekend games. But yeah, the idea that I can sit down this weekend and just disappear watching a bunch of hockey will be pretty awesome. And it helps that Wisconsin series being like I always have to decide between going to Madison to watch the games in person or to stay home, because being outside of Madison, like if I go to a game, that's a whole day and I'm not watching a ton of other hockey. So that Thursday St. Thomas means I get to go watch that, but still be home this weekend watching everything else, which will be nice.
Right. All right. We hope you enjoy watching the hockey, whichever game or games they happen to be this weekend. And thanks for joining us on the podcast. For Nicole, I'm Todd. We'll talk to you next week.